Hey, good evening, YouTube. It's me, Chris, and you're watching Coins in the Wild. Welcome to the channel this evening. I was wanting to share a nice video with you. Topic of this evening's video is one of our viewers wrote in. He was watching the PCGS unboxing videos, I'm assuming the first one, and he says the quarter is 1 of 15 because few people would send in that modern of a coin to be graded. So that's an interesting comment, and let me just kind of take a few minutes and tell you what the backdrop of the story is. So he's actually referring to this coin that I sent in for grading in the initial unboxing video, and this is a 1990p MS67 Washington quarter, and you can see the quarter there. There is the obverse. It's a good looking coin, looks really, really clear up close. The fields are nice and bright and clean, has lots of luster, and as you can see overall, even looking at the back of the coin, this coin is well struck. So his point was that it's easier to find these coins, these modern coins, in higher grades because very few people would send them in for grading, and that's why the population was so low, and at the moment the value was so high because this had an auction estimate of $1,850 US dollars. I decided to do a little research because of that question or point that he raised and see if that's actually true. If there's actually fewer coins that are sent in of this quality just because nobody sends in modern coins for grading. So I discovered something kind of interesting and I wanted to share it with everyone on the channel. You'll notice if you look at our screen, you'll notice that I'm looking at the Roosevelt dime, and in this particular screen shot you can see it's 2008 Roosevelt dime to 2011. But you'll notice over on the right that the highest grade that you can see is one example of a Mint State 69 Roosevelt dime, and then everything else falls in Mint State 68 and 67 and lower. But you'll notice for some years, for example, the 2009 Philadelphia Mint Roosevelt dime, there are no Mint State 68s. The 2010 Denver Mint Roosevelt dime, there's no Mint State 68s either, and so on. And actually, if we do a little history check on this, and we'll go back a little bit, you're going to see that there are no Mint State 69s, and there sporadically are Mint State 68s. Now you get into some of these early 2000 coins, there's some Mint State 69s. But again, it's still sporadic. In the majority of cases, there are no Mint State 69 coins. Now, we'll go a little further back. Again, there's a big gap. We'll go a little further back and so on. You start to get the idea that it's difficult as the years go back to actually find Mint State 69 Roosevelt dimes. And then the Mint State 68 actually have fairly high values. In this example, if you look at the 1997 Denver Mint with full bands, you're looking at an $1,100 example for a Mint State 68 coin. And then and so on, it does that. Now, what was interesting in looking at the history, you see the big gap, no Mint State 69s, there's some Mint State 68s now, and then so on, and there's some gaps even in Mint State 68s. And if we do the same thing with a Lincoln Cent, we actually see a similar pattern, although there are more Mint State 69s with the Lincoln Cent. And just so on, it kind of follows a very similar pattern. And then if we go over to the Jefferson nickel, which the Jefferson nickel is actually kind of interesting, there are very few examples of Mint State 68 Jefferson nickels. You can see there, and there is a 1968 San Francisco Mint, Mint State 69 Jefferson nickel. But if you look at the ones with full steps of the Jefferson nickel, there are very few examples of the full step Jefferson nickel, especially early on. And if we go to later dates of the coin, you'll find that there are some Mint State 67 examples, but they're all fairly high value. And if we go over to the Kennedy halves, we start to notice the same thing. So before we jump over to Kennedy halves, let me make a point. There are very few examples of Mint State 68 Jefferson nickels. And we can see that right away if we go over to this example here, the next page. No Mint State 68s, no Mint State 68s, and so on. We're already in the 1980s. No Mint State 68s, and the Mint State 67s are sporadic. Now, there's one example of a 1989 Philadelphia Mint. Mint State 68 Jefferson nickel, it is full steps and has an approximate auction value of $5,500. So we start to see a pattern here though. Mint State 68s in Jefferson nickels full steps are rare. There are Mint State 67s are sporadic, and the Mint State 66s tend to be reasonably valuable. You'll notice there the 1988 Philadelphia Mint State 66, $115. If you have Mint State 66 Plus, the auction value estimate is $450, and so on. And the only time it actually drops lower in Mint State 67 in terms of those pricing is when there is an example of a Mint State, drops lower in Mint State 66 is when there is a Mint State 67 example. And you can see that there in the 1988 Denver Mint. Mint State 67 is $225. And if it was a full steps example, it's $3,000. So you can see how within certain coins, there's a rarity as you get into higher grades. Sometimes Mint State 68s are more common, and then sometimes they're not common at all, as in the example of the Jefferson nickel. And then at other times, it's a little different. Let's take a look at something. So Kennedy halves, if we hop on over here to Kennedy half, and we start to see the same situation. I was looking at this earlier. Mint State 64, that's very rare to find a 1964 Kennedy half. It's very rare to find a Mint State 68 example. You can see that there. And if we scroll through the history on this, see how valuable the Mint State 68s are, $15,000 for a 1966 clad silver Mint State example, Mint State 68, and then so on. Same thing, 1971D Denver Mint. There's an example, but look at the gaps. No Mint State 68s. 1977 Denver Mint, there's a Mint State 68, but more commonly they're Mint State 67s when we look at this chart. Now let's go over to the Washington Quarter because he made a point of this. So Washington Quarter, if we look at the year 1969, there are no Mint State 68 examples, but Mint State 67s are available. And look at the auction estimates on that, $3,000 for a Mint State 67 example, Mint State 67 Plus, $11,500. And then there are gaps, throughout the years. And if we scroll through this a little more, and to see the same thing, you see gaps in the 70s, gaps all throughout the 70s. There is a Mint State 1979 Mint State 68 example, auction estimate $6,500. There's a 1982 Philadelphia Mint example after that, but more commonly, they're Mint State 67s. So his point was that the only reason that the quarter, or the Washington Quarter that I had, was 1 of 15 is because few people would actually send in a modern coin for grading like this. But the truth is, the reason why the Washington Quarter is so valuable in a Mint State 67, being an $1,850 auction estimate, is because there are very few examples of Mint State 67 or better in Washington Quarters throughout the entire series, meaning the range of all of the years. And I think that's really important thing to think of because it teaches us as collectors and as somebody who may be investing in coins that we should be looking for Washington Quarters and Mint State 67. Kennedy halves, if we go back there, Mint State 67 examples are very valuable. You look at those numbers there on the right. And then if we go over to the Jefferson nickel, absolutely Mint State 67. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find a Jefferson nickel in a Mint State 67 example. More commonly, you're going to find Mint State 66s, and they're still going to have a little value to them. Now, with the Lincoln cents, in my estimation, from my experience, breaking coins out of the mint sets, they tend to be more common in the higher grades, meaning that Mint State 68 is probably the lowest a grade level somebody should be the lowest grade that somebody should be shooting for when they send a coin in for grading to PCGS. And ideally, you want to find Mint State 69. And it looks like in the mint set examples, you're never going to find a Mint State 70 example. And that's just because they're handled different. They get clanged around. They're not handled like proof coins, and they definitely get marks on them. So you're not going to find a Lincoln cent in a Mint State 67 example. So really interesting point, really interesting thoughts about that. And if we look over at the Roosevelt dime, they tend to be better struck. So they're fairly more common in Mint State 68 examples, but still have a bit of rarity, and you can see that according to those values there. Really seems very clear that when we're looking for coins to be graded, Mint Set examples, you're shooting for a minimum of Mint State 67 with Washington quarters, Kennedy halves, Jefferson nickel minimum of Mint State 66. Lincoln cents you want a minimum of a Mint State 68, and then the Roosevelt dimes the same thing, a minimum of Mint State 68. And ideally, you want the Roosevelt dime to be full bands or full torch if you use the NGC language, and then the Jefferson nickel you'd like for it to be full steps. So that's really something you want to aim for. So I thought this was an interesting way to give us an idea of what types of coins we should be looking for. And you always want to go online and compare it. I'll put this coin back on the video again in case you're looking at examples for grading purposes and you want to see what your coin should look like. This is it. Very, very light chatter in the fields. That hair on the Washington quarter is incredibly well struck, and if it's under magnification, there are no flaws on it whatsoever. 1990 Philadelphia Mint Washington quarter. There's no marks on the face, nothing on the neck, nothing on the forehead. Everything looks good on this coin. And then we'll have a quick look at the back. This is a Mint State 67 example. And then you'll see even the chest feathers. That's where you notice the weakness in the strike, I think, on the Washington quarters, is the feathers on the chest tend to be softly struck. But in this example, the wings are all well defined. The feathers in the wings are well defined. And the feathers on the chest seem to be fairly well struck. And so you get a nice example, and the fields are nice and clear on this coin. And nice luster as well. You can see that in the light. So YouTube, best wishes out there to find Mint State 67 or better in some of these types of coins. And just to answer his question. Now this question came from a viewer. His name is Chris OB is the name of his channel. And Chris, I want to thank you for your question. We appreciate your input. This is definitely not to put you on the spot, but I thought you would raise an excellent question to be considered. And so I thought I'd reach out and share this with all of our viewers. So thanks again for watching YouTube. It's me, Chris. You're watching Coins in the Wild. Please hit the like button down below if you enjoyed this video. Please hit that bell button for more videos coming soon. And if you're not yet a subscriber, we invite you to subscribe to the channel. So thanks again, YouTube, for watching. It's me, Chris. You're watching Coins in the Wild. We wish you a very nice evening. Bye now.